a New Testament believer, and maybe you are not used to reading the Old Testament, and if you read the Old Testament, maybe you only know Genesis and Isaiah. And you might be wondering, where is Prophet Hosea? Well, you better get to know him now. Because if you don't get to know him on time, and you go to heaven, and you walk them golden straight, and a man comes to you and says, did you read my book? And he says, my name is Hosea. I have a book in the Bible that you are supposed to have read while you were there on the earth. And you say, oh, no, I know Isaiah. I said, no, I'm not Isaiah. I said, maybe you are Ezekiel. He said, no, I'm not Ezekiel. I am Prophet Hosea. So it's better for us to go into Hosea now so that you will not be embarrassed when you meet him. In the world beyond. Because some of us are believers of Matthew and Luke and Revelations and Genesis. So let's get to know the little prophets also. Anyway, Hosea chapter 12, verse 13. It says, by a prophet, the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. And by a prophet, he was preserved. I read again. By a prophet, the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. And by a prophet, he was preserved. Listen closely. For things to change in the world, it's not the parliament that you need. And it's not the Congress or the Senate. For things to change on the face of the earth, what you need is a man sent from above. That is why today we are celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King. If not for him and for men of authority and men who knew who they were sent from and by, we wouldn't have been gathering here today in a white church with a black gospel choir. Yeah, hallelujah. And a black African in Russian tongue coming to speak to you. So we understand what has happened. But we don't just understand what did happen, but we want to understand the mind of God about his workings with us today so that we might be able to do something like they did yesterday to change today for us to live in, so that we might be able to do something today to change the tomorrow that the future will live in.
That's right. That's right.
The principle of God is still the same, and it has ever been the same from the day of creation, is that God has always been in need of a man. And until a man is located that believes God and that knows the mandate of God upon his life, and that knows that he is a voice from God, nothing changes on the earth. There must be a man to recognize his destiny from God before any change can take place. In physics, in science, it says everything remains static until there is a pressure applied. Everything. That is to say, if you leave this podium or this whatever you call it, this stick microphone stand, this stand here, the way it is, if you come in 10 years' time and nobody comes here, nobody applies any pressure to it or against it or from, something like that, it stands like this for the next 10 years. Everything remains static until a pressure is applied. Now, some of us are complaining about the situation in the world, about situations in our communities, about situations in our nation. Some of us are complaining about the gay situation. Some of us are complaining about the economic situation. Some of us are complaining about the things that were proclaimed even by likes of Dr. Martin Luther King, but that have not yet been realized in our generation. And we just talk and complain about them. But you see, the truth is, we need God and nation, any nation, any time, we are always in need of a man that will come and apply the needed pressure for a change to commence. Yeah. Everything remains the way it is until there is somebody that is ready to believe that it's a voice sent from God to apply the pressure necessary to commence a change. So it says in this place, the children of Israel would have remained in bondage in Egypt if a man was not found who believed that he was a prophet. That is who Dr. Martin Luther King was. He believed he had a voice because he was created by God with a given assignment, just like you. Listen closely. We don't just celebrate a man. We understand the factor that made him who he was, who he became. And recognizing that same factor and principle will make us to become who we are supposed to become. Yeah. Hallelujah. And the point I'm making is, there is a destiny for you. There is something for you to change. Dr. Martin Luther King changed something because he understood his destiny. What are you changing in your life and in your lifetime? Everybody is sent to this world as an agent of change. That is why I found myself in Russia. In Europe, there was no mega church before our church appeared. There were churches of 2,000, 3,000. But the people were saying, in Europe, this is not America, this is not Africa, this is not Latin America. It is not possible to have a mega church in Europe. But I saw it in Africa. I was a 19-year-old lad when I left my motherland. And I went to Russia. And believed God. Because something has to be done by somebody. Every change, everything that you desire to have, it is because you have not yet had somebody come to do it. Everything that we ever desire for, everything that that we are lacking is because we don't have the right person to come to say, there is a change that could be made here. So if there is no mega churches in Europe, it's because there is no man that dare to believe God. So I believe God. I believe this calling. Jesus appeared to me and said, I have called many people, and I'm still calling many people to build large churches, mega churches in Eastern and Western and all of Europe. And I was a bit skeptic. He said, will you believe me or not? Then I realized that if there is anything to be changed, it has to be undertaken by a man. I decided to believe God. Now, in 10 years of our ministry, our church has become the largest church in the whole of Europe, west or east, doesn't matter. And of course, you realize that we don't have blacks in Russia. So that is how I ended up pastoring a church that is 99% white. And so if we have 25,000 people in our church, we have only 15 blacks, out of 25,000 people. And somebody says it's not possible also, because all over Europe you see black people, African people pastoring Africans. But you see, it says, by a prophet, the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. Yeah. If God could find a prophet, you can make the necessary change that is necessary and needed in your community. Don't wait for another person to come. You are the agent that God has sent. If you are not changing something in your life, and if you are not making an impact with your life, then you have missed the whole sense of creation. You are made in His own image to reflect Him and His glory. Hello? There is nothing that is strong enough to hold you back if you can believe God. Maybe some of you have heard of the KGB. KGB fought me with everything they had, because they think it's an embarrassment for a black man to lead a congregation of white people. But I am still standing. By a prophet. Remember that. Well, you don't need to have angels come to you before you become a prophet. A prophet is a man that has a message. And that is why if you like it or not, Dr. Martin Luther King said he had a message and he believed God for that message. Will you believe God that God has sent you here to effect a particular change, maybe where you live, maybe in another nation? I thought if I would be useful for anything at all, the only place I could be useful for anything would be Africa. But never put a limit on God. Just make sure you give yourself unto Him and tell Him you surrender and that you are ready. If you could be ready to commit your life to God, don't waste that life that God gave you on nothing. Don't just eat and sleep until they send you to your graveyard. Decide to be relevant, just like Dr. Martin Luther King did. Now, look at Dr. Martin Luther King. He didn't have any opportunity, as we do. Now they have paved the way for us. In their days, things were much more difficult. But he broke through limitations. He broke through hindrances. We don't even have 1/10 of the hindrances that they had. But yet, they made an impact. But we have more freedom, more opportunities, and we think we are impotent. We are not impotent with God. With God, all things are possible. God is looking for a man. Because by a prophet, God delivered Israel from Egypt. If a deliverance is possible, it's not because God has sent an angel. No, it's because a man was identified. So it's not by Jesus or by God that Israel was delivered. That is the point I was making. It's not by God that Israel was delivered from Egypt. God did it, but without a man, he wouldn't have done it. That is why God himself is writing in his book that it's not God who delivered Israel, but by a prophet. It is a prophet who did it. Don't wait for angels to come down. Don't wait for Jesus to come back again. You are here. You are the Jesus to make that change that is necessary. By a prophet, Israel was delivered from Egypt. And because of you, if you receive the challenge from God, that you are needed, that you are an agent of change for something, somewhere, that you are relevant, that you could be used by God to make a difference. I come from a village that of 40 houses. I never saw my father. But you can never be limited when you believe God. Now, I am speaking to kings and senators. I have senators in my church. I have millionaires in my church. I'm speaking to the leaders of nations because I believe God. Don't put that lid on yourself. Remove the limitation from your head. Don't think your life and your destiny will end in a little village somewhere at the backyard somewhere. Don't think nothing will ever come out tangible from your life. Don't limit my God like that. My God, He died to deliver you and to make you something tangible. Believe God for it. You will be surprised what will come out of you. Remove that limitation. Remove that limitation. Remove it. Because the only limitation you have in life is the limitation in your mind. If you don't have that, if you could be free in your mind, you will not just be free. You will be free to set nations free. Martin Luther King proved it. And because I can remember his example, I can prove it also all over the world. So can you. Bless you.